Right. Well, thanks very much for having me. What what I'd like to do today is to give you sort of my journey with trying to use technology to better my teaching. Now, I teach organic chemistry at Drexel, and so a lot of the things that I'll be talking about are chemistry specific. I'll be showing molecules and reactions and things like that. But you want to think in terms of your own field. How that can map, especially when I talk about things in Second Life. All right, so those are just specific examples, but this, will be completely general. So again, I'm going to focus on chemistry here, but think about so it's not really about the technology, all right? It's really about the teaching, and what we're trying to do as teachers is we're not trying to do anything else except produce people who are going to be competent in their field. And I think that, people lose that a little bit when they start to think it's about the technology, but it really isn't. And if you make it about the technology, then it's not going to work because people are not going to be using it for actually doing what they were hired to do. So if we focus on that and keep remembering that, we can keep adapting as new technologies come on board. So you have to think about, again, from the chemistry perspective, if I'm trying to make chemists, what does it actually mean? And I think that it really boils down to having somebody who's chemically literate at the undergraduate level, and someone who's competent to create new, useful chemical knowledge at the graduate level. And I'll be showing you tools that can operate at both those levels, and they might not necessarily be exactly the same tools. So I'll show you that by example. All right, so as teachers, how do we actually do this? How do we make chemists in the case of chemistry? So we have to do three things pretty well. We have to select and deliver content. That's our choice. We have to assess and validate the skill and knowledge of the students. So we can give content all we want, but if we don't evaluate the students, we don't know if they've learned it or not. And the third thing is we can actually operate by catalyzing the learning process, which is something that most teachers don't have time to do because they're very busy trying to deliver the content and trying to assess their students. And that for me is probably one of the most important advantages of this new technology, is that if you use it in the right way, you can generate this time that you can use in a way that you couldn't previously. Okay, so I'll be talking about specifically my organic chemistry courses, sort of as a journey, like I said. So I'm going to be starting with, this is what I started with in '96 when I came to Drexel. So traditional lecture-based course, of course done face-to-face. All of the grading was completely manual. And there was really, sure, I had office hours. We all have office hours, and we used email. But that's just really not enough time for doing a lot of the in-depth work that I'm now able to do with my students. But this is our starting point. So I'll be going through each one of those three items. The first one is assessment. So what actually happened over the course of time? So as I just mentioned, initially we had manual grading. And then I started to use WebCT. So I think you guys here use Blackboard, which is, they're now merged. So it's basically the same concept. And any of you here use the quizzes feature? So a few people. Basically, my classes started to get larger and larger, and it seemed to be something that was worth investigating. It is an investment in time. Some of the things I'll be talking to you about are quick fixes or quick to implement. This is not necessarily one of them, because you do have to set up your question base, and you have to learn how to use the system. But I was very happy with the kind of things that I was getting out of the system. First time that I implemented them, it was not grading the student. I was just experimenting with the system, and when I saw that this could be used for grading, then I moved on to do all my tests and exam with automated grading. And I used the video surveillance system that's already at Drexel. It's already built into the public safety. So that's an option depending on what level of security you want. That's something that you might consider. And then I started to get into using blogs and wikis for different reasons, but I saw the potential for teaching. And so I will give you some screenshots and some examples of the types of things that you can do with that. I then got involved with gaming, and so I used Unreal Tournament, which is a first-person shooter game, kind of like Halo, that kind of style. And you'll see the evolution of that, and whether or not weapons make a difference and all of that kind of thing. And at the end, I actually settled on Second Life. So I actually don't use the first-person shooter game anymore because I think Second Life is a lot richer and there's a lot more potential, actually. Okay, the other component, the content delivery, again, evolution over about 10 years. So first, of course, face-to-face with paper handouts, and then face-to-face with online PDFs. So a lot of people use the Blackboard, the WebCT systems, initially to upload their syllabi. And that's a no-brainer. It's very, very simple to do. It's something that all the students can find very easily. It's very little work. So that's sort of a no-brainer. Next here, I started to record my lectures. So I'm using Camtasia, but I hear some of you guys are using Cam Studio. Anybody here using the Cam Studio? So George was telling me about his use of that. So it'll record whatever is on the screen. So I'm actually recording this talk now, and then if you wanted to review it, you could give a link to somebody, and it would be pretty similar experience. But these were optional. So in the sense that I'm still giving the lecture in class, but I'm recording it, and then I'm making it available to the students. And there's no penalty, for them not following it. And a little bit later, actually, this whole podcasting phenomenon started to get going. And actually, a student asked me, he had a slow connection at home, and he said, "Do you have just the audio of the class?" And I hadn't considered it before, and I started to look into it, and I learned the tools for how to podcast, and basically it was helpful. But again, I didn't replace the screencast recordings. It was just another channel, and also providing PDFs over iTunes and things like that. Then I started to get more heavily involved in using blogs to deliver content. All right, and I'll definitely show a lot of examples of that. Video podcasting through iTunes. And I did start then organize things and to make it, and it's very, very quick for use. And you'll see that it's a completely a different function for anyone to learn how to do it. So that's one of those quick and dirty things that actually does work. I will then talk about my use of YouTube and Google Video. So these also turn out to be very, very handy for certain types of problems. YouTube, for example, you can't really upload anything more than 10 minutes, so you wouldn't necessarily put a whole lecture on there, but you could put quick solutions to problems, and I find that to be very useful. And because it's so public, you get contacts from people around the world, other organic chemistry students, who either like what you did or point out a problem, and I think that's extremely useful as a teacher. I won't talk too much about Google Co-op, but I'll show you that there's a search bar. Google is, of course, a wonderful company, and there's a lot of things that they enable you to do for free. And one of these things is called Google Co-op, where you can actually specify a whole list of authorized links for your class. So if there's an online textbook you like, if you want to use Wikipedia, you can include it. If you don't want to use Wikipedia, you can exclude it. So that when the student types their search term, it won't search the whole internet. It'll just search the resources that you approved. So that's a really nice little trick. Again, nice quick and dirty thing you can do. And I'll show you actually right now, I'm not using podcasting in the way that I did initially because now I have archives. So it turns out that if you already have a full archive, it's just a lot easier to give it in a zip file to the student than showing them how to use iTunes. All right, so showing that. Now you notice here that I went from recording lectures, making it optional, and then eventually actually I completely replaced the live lecture. And this is the reason. For one of the terms, I actually studied the attendance of the students as I was making my, and again, this is video, all right? So it's not just audio podcast. This is the whole experience. Everything goes on the screen, all of my recordings. The attendance drops until the end of the term. It goes to like 10 to 20% in both classes. But this gave me a great opportunity actually to evaluate the performance of students that were actually still coming to class versus those that weren't. And the performance was identical. So I realized that I was wasting my time repeating myself term after term, And from that point on, I assign the recorded lectures in the same way that I would assign a book chapter, and I would do workshops with my students. So they'll come in, and we'll work on specific problems. So I have time to work with them one-on-one. You know, we can do all kinds of things. We can get into Second Life. But basically, that frees up the class time for me to be more involved with my students. And this is what we're talking about here. This whole learning catalysis concept, which I think is absolutely critical as a teacher. You have to have time to do this kind of stuff, because it's not enough just to put the content out there and to test the students. You don't honestly need a teacher to do that, right? I mean, the university could fire all the teachers if that's all it came down to. But teaching is about interacting with students, and it's about, you know, taking your knowledge base, evaluating the knowledge of the student, and trying to customize your interaction with them. Of course, it requires the participation of the students, and that's their, you know, prerogative. If they don't want to attend those sessions, that's okay, but they're not going to get as much out of the class as the students who do come. So, you know, it's just it's a teaching philosophy that I have that I think works. All right, so now let's get to, we're almost up to the screenshots. I just want to show you how all of this is laid out. So I do still use a course management system. We use WebCT, but it's not the center of the class. The center of the class is actually the wiki, and this is public. So I try to make as much as possible, all my class material public. And the assessment, of course, is not, well, actually a part of it is. There's a demo account where you can take my quizzes. But, you know, in terms of the tests that my students take, you have to be, of course, registered in the class, and so there's a whole security thing. But otherwise, the wiki is a central thing, and then we've got the content, you know, as available as possible. I have the interaction of my students. I'll show you some of that. I've already talked about the workshops. I have students doing blog assignments sometimes, wiki assignments, and I can show you examples of that. But everything starts at the wiki. And this is a little slide. Don't take it too seriously when I say, you know, the unhappy old person here. All the tools have their uses, all right? But it is kind of nice when you discover these new tools where instead of, you know, you pushing on your students, emailing them or, you know, contacting them in some direct way, like with a phone, with most of these new technologies rely on a pull system where you put your stuff out there, and the receiver actually is the one who goes and subscribes to your stuff. So you can't force anybody to read your material. So yeah, it's great in many ways in that you can, you know, get more subscribers. You know, it's not as forceful, and some of that is a disadvantage where, you know, you do have to assume that students are going to be, you know, subscribed to your stuff. So it's not necessarily happy and bad, but I think once you experience both, you can then allocate, you know, which tool you want to use for which purpose. All right, so these are the screenshots, and again, this is, you know, for organic chemistry, but it could apply to any field. So this is the website that the students get when they're first introduced to my course. And here is the Google co-op search. So that's right, you know, the first thing on the wiki page. So if they want to search for concept in the class, they can put their search term in there, and that'll search, you know, like I said, all of the online textbooks that I mentioned, but it'll search also the transcripts of my lectures. It'll search, you know, any content that I have that's in text form. So this is actually a really convenient tool. And I record the first lecture, and I, you know, put it in Flash, put it in MP3, whatever. And if, you know, a student misses the first lecture, which is the only live lecture of the class, then, you know, I can point them here. So that's actually pretty handy. And really, it's just a little explanation of the class. On the bottom of this front page are the links to all of the resources of the class. So I'm not going to go through all of these today. I just took screenshots because I don't rely on the web. You never know when it's not actually going to work, right, when you need it. But of course, all of these are what they say. And the wiki, the idea of the wiki is that anyone that has permission can go in on it, can hit an edit button, and can add a link or can add content. All right. So this didn't develop by anybody writing HTML or anything like that. It didn't develop by any plan, actually. It's just, oh, I have to give my syllabus, I'll put it here. As you keep getting the same questions, I should probably have an FAQ page. So you add it there. So the wiki develops, and again, if you remember this push-pull system, anyone in the world can subscribe to that wiki for changes. And you can either get it through a blog reader or through email with Wikispaces. So that's also nice, which you don't get with a regular web page. So that's just part of the benefits. So these things are new here. Again, I've just found if you already have an archive of lectures, there's no point in messing around with podcasting. Just give the whole thing. It's about 1.5 gigs, and then they're done for the term. You know, they can access everything.
That's for the audio. That's not video.
Yeah.
Okay.
M4V files. So the M4V files will play on their video iPods as well. Yeah, it's not that big actually. It's, if you put the settings right.
You're just capturing if you're just capturing the board.
Yeah, I'm just capturing the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're like 50 megs per hour or something like that. It's really quite reasonable. And at the bottom here is a site meter, and what this does basically is it's a free service that sees how people are finding your site. So if they're using Google with certain search terms, you can look at that. And it's a thing that I like to put on all of my websites, whether they be blogs or wikis. First of all, it's free, and secondly, it's pretty interesting actually to make that stuff public. So people should know what kind of website it is, and you can get a really good idea by looking at recent hits. Okay, so the blog. So the first time that I taught this class and recorded it, I used the blog, which made a lot of sense because with the blog, it's chronological. So you have a class, and then you go and blog about it. So you write some things, you upload your files, you can link to the PDF, you can link to the flash recording, you can link to the audio, and there's a way of doing this with Blogger that enables you to do podcasting really easily. So if some of you want to talk to me about that afterwards, I'll be happy to discuss it. But so what happens if this is in a live class? It makes a lot of sense because you get new posts after every class. But once the class is all recorded, and I'm not going to be redoing that class live anymore, the blog, it's not necessarily the best way to contain the information because it's not live anymore. So this one, for example, hasn't changed since 2005. But it already has all of the the text for all of my classes, so I still use it. But if I were to redo this, I would probably put this in a wiki because it's a static document basically at this point. Do any of you have blogs? Maintain blogs? Okay. So with a blog, again, it's just it's a web page that has chronological postings. That's all. So if you want to follow it, you can use different feed readers. I used to use Bloglines. I now use the Google Reader. I think it's pretty good. It comes with your Gmail account. And whenever there's a new post, it'll show you that you have so many posts. So if you're following a lot of blogs at the same time, it's better to have a reader because there's just one place to go. If you're only following one blog, then it makes no sense to have a reader. You might as well just go to the website, right? So a reader would be to manage multiple sites. So again, I used to teach my students how to do this, but the reality is now, because I don't have any new posts, there's no point. I just give them the zip archive. Of course, one advantage of having in a podcast format is you can put your stuff on iTunes so that people can find you like that. They just click on subscribe, and then this will sync up with your iPod, your video iPod. iTunes can also handle PDFs, so if you want to distribute material like that, it won't play on the video iPod, I don't think, but it will certainly play on their computer. And this is just to show what the interface looks like for the student. So you've got, again, the PDFs show up with a little book next to it. And then you have these other recordings. There's none like this here. If there were video, it would have a little television set. And if it doesn't have anything, then it's just, you know, audio by default. And again, the video iPod, you would convert your file to an M4V format, and that's not very difficult to do. And that will also play using QuickTime. So they don't need a video iPod to look at the M4V format, or the MP4, same thing. So I've used the blog in a number of other ways, and again, this is an evolution. So before I learned about wikis, I used a blog to record these FAQs. This is the big limitation. If you have a change here, you know, you can certainly change a blog post, but blog posts are not really meant to be constantly changing. They're meant to publish once, and then you archive them, and you can access them at any time. But there's always changes, right, in a class. So the FAQ now I actually run on the wiki, but initially I would just run it like this on a blog. So basically what's nice when you make these things available to the rest of the world, you find actually that there's a lot of interest. I know that there's a lot of pre-med students that contact me about my classes. And when I was first doing this, I don't think that there were any other organic chemistry video recordings, but now, you know, there's a lot. I mean, Berkeley has them. There's a lot of different places you can get them now. But especially at the beginning, you know, a lot of students are really appreciative to be able to access that, because they may be in a course where they'd like another interpretation of the material, and so having the actual lecture recordings is you know, really useful if you want to have open courseware. Okay, now going to the assessment part. So student blogging. Well, it is not mandatory in my class. I have like between 175 to 200 students usually, and you don't want to blog with 200 students, because this is one of these things that it will require more time. You cannot assume that, first of all, students are familiar at all with the technology. Most are not, and so you have to really start at the beginning. And so I do this as an extra credit work. I'll offer like up to 2% of their final grade will be on either, you know, a Second Life assignment or a blog assignment or a wiki assignment, and that's worked pretty well for me, where I might get maybe 5 students out of the class who will really take me up on this and do, you know, the actual work for it. But this is nice for them as well, because they have a record of their class that's open and public, and they can, you know, use as a link, sort of their e-portfolio. Now, I didn't talk about this at all, but in my laboratory, I actually have a public wiki that's used as the lab notebook. So my undergrad students and my grad students working in my lab will actually post new pages for all the experiments they're doing. And what's nice about that is that it's public, and I can use that as an example of real active research to show my undergrads, you know, what research is actually like. And so I've been doing that for the past couple of years, where these students, their assignment, remember this is the introductory organic chemistry, so they're just learning about this stuff. But as they see concepts, they have to try to relate it to something in the live lab notebook. And of course, you know, that's messy, because it's, you know, students are posting to it all the time, they're updating. So it is kind of nice to give them that other view, where, you know, how everything works perfectly in your textbook. Of course, real life isn't like that, and so you can, you know, show them a little bit of that flavor. An example is this. We use NMRs, which are basically just plots that we use to analyze chemical data. And this is something, I don't want to, you know, talk about chemistry very much, but this is something that we did not cover in class. The fact that this line here is split into 3, and it was something that the student came across, and she, you know, talked to me and said, why doesn't this match what we learned in class? And so we had a chance to discuss it, and she was able to put this up as a blog post, or as a wiki post, and she's able to show the data and then link back to the actual experiment from the lab. So this I really like a lot, because, you know, the way that we teach things is always too simplistic, and it's nice to show them the exceptions. It's nice to show them how it actually works. So why a wiki? Well, a wiki is very different from a blog, in that a blog you're going to be posting chronologically. All right, so if you make a blog post today, right, it'll be, what is it, we're 18th today, or 17th? So it'll be March 17th. For the rest of time, you'll be able to link back to this entry. You can change a blog post, but you really, really try not to, okay, because people don't expect them to be changed, so they're not really, looking for that. A wiki is exactly the opposite. People expect the wiki to change constantly. So you can have a wiki page that could go through 30 different versions. And that's okay, because you can always go back in time and see what all the previous versions were. So here, for example, is a page of one of these wiki assignments that my students did. And you can see every version here. So this is my undergrad, this is me, this is my grad student. And you can see everybody's contribution to that page. So you can't really, unless you're the organizer, you can't really delete the page. If somebody were to come and just put blanks everywhere, you could just revert to a prior version. So a wiki is pretty safe in that regard. And it is extremely nice to be able to see all the different versions in a project. And the way these show up, I use Wikispaces, which is a free and hosted service. So if any of you are interested in starting a wiki, you can do that 100% for free with this service. So this is really the nice feature here. When you compare two versions, it'll show you in red the stuff that got deleted, and it'll show you in green the stuff that got added. So you don't have to look very much for the different versions of the pages. So if you ask a question of a student, and then there's a change, all you do is you look at the two versions, and you'll see in green will be their new stuff. Sometimes students will go and delete your comments without making any changes, so you can catch that really easily with this feature. And this is the site meter that I told you earlier about today. So not only does it tell you how many visitors you get and what their search terms are, it'll also show you where they're coming from. And I'm just showing this as an example of the kind of world that we're in today, where this is a course that's only taken for credit by students at Drexel, but yet there's people from around the world that are somehow finding it and making use of it. So I would encourage any of you, if you're interested in sharing more of what you do, if you can, definitely this is a good time in the internet era to do so. So I want to talk about a few other different things you can do with technology. This is a little game that I did with my students, more upper level organic, maybe organic 3, that I call Wheel of Orgo. And the idea is I will use a tablet PC. You could also use a smartboard, but I actually prefer the tablet PC where you can write on it. And I will put the starting material, and I will put the product that we're trying to make, and then we'll go in turn where the students will put one step. So a student might try this, and then they'll write something. If it's correct, they get a point. If it's not correct, I can correct them, and then they can get their turnaround again. And the idea is to complete. So the idea is to either put an arrow going forward here, or put an arrow going to the product. And at some point, the two will connect, and by definition, you have a chemical synthesis. And this is something where, what's the investment in time here? It's really nothing. I mean, if you already have time to spend with your students, that catalysis time I was telling you about, this is, a perfect way to implement the boring stuff that you teach through your content delivery mechanisms. All right. So a little bit more about games. I told you about the first-person shooter game, Unreal Tournament. So there's actually two different versions of that game. There's the popular version with the weapons, but there's actually a free version that doesn't have any weapons. All you can build mazes, castles, whatever you want, and people can walk through them. So I basically set up the system where you've got these doors so in a room there's 4 doors, and on it is going to be some image that's either correct or incorrect. So 3 of the images will somehow be incorrect, and one of the images will be correct. The idea is that they walk through the door that's correct. If they do walk through the correct one, they go to the next level in the maze. If they walk through an incorrect one, they have to start over. So I was able to have a system where I could do races with my students. So they would all start at the same time, and the first one to make it to the 20th level would win a prize. I would give them like a molecular model kit or a book or something like that. And so this is something else that works with some students. Not everybody wants to do it, so I never make this mandatory. I think you run into problem with these things when you start to make them mandatory. So I'm not teaching new material here. This is the same material that's in my lectures, the same material that's in my quizzes. It's just another way for, students to do it differently. Now, I did actually use the weapons version. The disadvantage with that is that it's a commercial game, so you actually have to buy it. You have to figure out how to buy it. We had a couple of copies installed in the libraries and things like that. And I think if Second Life had not come along, I would probably still be doing this. But Second Life did come along, and it's just so much richer in terms of the things that you can do. Second Life is not a game. Second Life is just an environment. So just to orient you here, these are the avatars. So this is actually me in this particular role, and this is how I view the world. I'll try to go on after. I think I can connect to the internet, and I'll walk you around. And so what I used here are obelisks instead of the mazes in the Unreal Tournament. So when you click on the obelisk, these 4 images come up. But it's the same deal, and I can have many obelisks in an area, and the students can all come and they can compete against each other, or they can come anytime and practice for the tests. So the only difference here is when you click on an incorrect one, you just got to start over. If you click on a correct one, it just gives you a new set of questions. Now, there's a lot you can do with Second Life, and again, this is going to be pretty chemistry specific. But of course, molecules are important. And so, working with Andrew Lang, one of my collaborators, basically have this we call a resor. It's an object in Second Life that enables you to do something. This particular resor allows you to create molecules. So you feed it information about the molecule, and it will create it in 3D. So you can see this is the size of our avatars. You can make a huge molecule. So it's a way of looking at chemistry in a way that's completely impractical in real life. I mean, you could buy a model kit that would be gigantic, but it's not, very convenient or practical. But you can do these kinds of things in Second Life. And you can do things like fly around on your molecule. So once you've made it, you can wear it and you can run around. This is actually on Nature Island. There's a lot of educational areas on Second Life, and I'd be happy to give you links to that if you're interested. And this is a buckyball, if you've heard of these. All right, so there is some chemistry there, and the really nice thing about Second Life, it's not so much what you can do there, it's the people that you can meet. So if you're in an area that all it has is science and molecules, you're likely to meet some pretty interesting people from around the world, whether they be other teachers or students, but you're going to meet people who have some interest in that area. If you go to other areas in Second Life that you may have heard a lot more about, then you'll find other kinds of people. So Second Life is much like the internet. You need to find the locations where there's the type of content that's of interest, and if you hang around there, you will definitely have a good experience and meet people. 3D periodic table. So again, we did this for the American Chemical Society, and so you can walk around this periodic table. You can click on these atoms, and it'll give you information about each element. So many things you can do. Again, you've got 3D here, so you can use your imagination in ways that you simply can't using a traditional website. Another thing that works extremely well in Second Life are posters. So if you have a PowerPoint, there are tools that we have. Actually, Drexel has an island called Drexel Island, and there's a store there. And there are these boards that you can get for free if any of you are interested. And you basically just export your PowerPoint in a JPEG format, and then just dump it into the board, and it will show your PowerPoint. So if you click on this, it'll actually change the slides. And the really nice thing about this is you can see, so this is me, and I'm talking to two people. And so Lally, this is Lally's poster actually. And you can either with voice talk to them, or you can type, so you can chat with them. And there's a little bell here that you can summon the presenter. So if the presenter's online, the text will be in green, and you can IM them and you can invite them over. If they're not online, it'll actually go to their email account. And if they happen to be online somewhere, they can quickly log into Second Life and come talk to you. So I really like posters for Second Life. I think it's a no-brainer basically, because it's easy to do. Everybody gets it. There's not very much training with it. You don't need to learn to do all kinds of tricky things. And in fact, I've organized conferences in Second Life. There's the SciFu conference that Nature and Google and O'Reilly organized last summer, and I extended some of the sessions on Nature Island by having a lot of posters and people presenting. So we'd have maybe 3 to 6 speakers, and most of these people had never been on Second Life, but yet they were able to present in very quick time. And of course, this is the social aspect of it. You meet a lot of people at conferences in Second Life. They're going to be attracted to the content. A lot of this content was about open science, so if you had any interest in that, you could certainly meet people. And you can have faculty offices, and this is really completely up to you. Here I have a little area with a real picture of me, some molecules. This is actually the chemistry department. It's a little pod area. And again, a lot of these things are very simple. Any images, that's very simple to do in Second Life. I think the big problem is people getting too ambitious with it. You have an idea and you want to do that particular thing for your class, but it's not a realistic idea. Now, there are people in Second Life who are developers who can definitely help you if you pay them. There's a lot of people who will do it for free. And so what you need to do is to talk to somebody who's already doing it and ask them how realistic your idea is. And most of the time, all people really want to do is they want to put up a presentation or a couple of posters. In chemistry, of course, I want to put molecules up. If you're in bio, maybe you have other needs, and so that would be something you would discuss with people. And I could certainly talk with you guys about that if you had any ideas. So in summary, you can use blogs for creating podcasts or for storing static sequential content. So transcripts also is a very quick and dirty thing. If you got transcripts, you can quickly create a blog, just dump them in there, and they will get indexed by Google pretty quickly. You can link them back to your recordings. So that's one of the things that I've done. You can use wikis to organize content and interact with students on assignments. Again, very, very useful. There's a versioning system in a wiki where you can actually see all the past actions. And you can use Second Life to stretch student and teacher imagination. And again, one of the things that people tend to discount is this networking aspect. I think that's very, very important. If your students can meet, a couple of people from around the world, that you never know who you're going to meet that can help your student down the road. And use multiple channels to deliver content. So this is not about using one of these tools versus another. What it is, it's about giving multiple channels to your students so that they will find the path that makes most sense to them. Some of the students will like Second Life, some of them won't. Some of them will like the WebCT quizzes, others won't. So as much as you possibly can, try to give it in different versions. And most of these technologies are simple, free, and hosted, so you really don't need anything for most of these. Second Life, you do need a place to build, but I can talk to you about that if you want to experiment. We can probably find a little place for you. Ultimately, yeah, if you want to buy an island, then that would be done at the institution level, and you know, I've gone through that process, so I can also advise. But certainly, you don't need to buy an island to get involved with Second Life. So that's it for my talk. Let me try to log on, and we'll see. I have a few more minutes.
Sure.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question while you're doing
Sure.
that?